The hall was filled with lights, cameras, and whispers. Every corner of the place seemed heavy with expectation. People had come to see stars, but no one knew that something far more powerful than fame was about to take place. It was not about awards or applause. It was about one moment of kindness that would stay in every heart forever. Sandra Bullock walked in quietly, her smile soft but forced. She looked strong, but deep inside she carried a weight that no one else could see. Years in Hollywood had made her shine, but also had left scars that she hid behind laughter. Many had seen her on screen, but only a few had ever noticed her silence when the cameras turned away. Tonight she tried to stand tall, but her eyes carried a storm. Keanu Reeves stood on the other side of the room, calm as always. He was not chasing the spotlight, and yet it always seemed to find him. He had a way of being present without making noise, of being kind without needing credit. People respected him for his humility, but most had no idea how far his kindness could reach. As the evening went on, Sandra's mask began to crack. She tried to laugh with the crowd, but her voice trembled. She remembered painful moments that had followed her for years. The loss of people she loved, the betrayals she never expected, and the loneliness that success could never erase. She thought no one noticed, but Keanu did. He watched from across the hall, his eyes steady. He could see what others missed. Her smile was brave, but her heart was breaking. Without saying a word, he began to move toward her. People turned their heads as Keanu crossed the room. Cameras flashed, thinking this was just another star walking toward a friend. But it was more than that. Sandra stood frozen, unsure why he was coming closer. She felt her chest tighten. When Keanu reached her, he did not make a scene. He did not give a speech. He simply placed his hand gently near her arm, as if to say, "You are not alone." The moment was so small, yet it felt like the world had stopped. Sandra looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears she had tried to hide. For a second, she forgot the cameras, the people, and the weight on her shoulders. She only felt his presence, calm and steady, like an anchor in the storm. Keanu leaned closer and whispered words that no one else could hear. Sandra's lips parted slightly and her breath caught. Whatever he said, it was enough to soften the pain she carried. Her eyes filled, but this time it was not only sadness. It was relief. The crowd noticed the change. They did not know the details, but they felt the energy shift. The hall grew silent, as if everyone sensed that something real was happening in front of them. Respect filled the room. People saw not two movie stars, but two human beings, one offering comfort, the other finally letting herself be seen. It was in that silence that hearts melted. The world saw that true strength was not in fame or power, but in humility, in kindness, and in the courage to stand beside someone when they needed it most. But no one knew that this was only the beginning. What happened next would surprise everyone, bringing moments of suspense, unexpected challenges, and powerful lessons about resilience and respect. Because kindness, once set in motion, often travels further than anyone can imagine. After that moment in the hall, Sandra felt something shift inside her. She had walked in feeling like a shadow, unseen in her pain. But Keanu's quiet gesture had reminded her of something she almost forgot, that even the strongest people sometimes need someone to lean on. Yet the night was not over. The event continued with speeches, awards, and applause. People smiled, but beneath the glitter, many carried their own battles. Sandra sat quietly, her thoughts drifting back to her past. She remembered the years when she had worked hard to prove herself, the times she smiled for the cameras even while crying alone in her home. She thought of the times she had trusted and been betrayed, of the relationships that left her feeling empty. As she sat, her heart felt heavy again. She wondered if she could truly escape the loneliness that had followed her for so long. Then, as if sensing her thoughts, Keanu walked over and sat beside her. He did not ask for permission. He simply sat, his presence steady, his silence powerful. Sandra turned her head and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Keanu gave her a small smile. "Because sometimes the kindest thing we can do is just be here. No words, no answers, just here." His voice was low, almost drowned by the noise around them, but his words pierced through her heart. She felt a lump rise in her throat. She was not used to this kind of honesty. In Hollywood, people often gave kindness with strings attached, but Keanu's kindness felt different. It was pure, without expectation. Suddenly, a voice called Sandra's name. She was being invited to the stage. Her heart raced. She had to stand before hundreds of eyes while she felt so fragile inside. She looked at Keanu, uncertain if she could make it. He nodded gently. "Go, you can do this. And remember, you're not alone." She stood and walked to the stage. Each step felt heavy, but the memory of Keanu's words gave her strength. When she reached the microphone, the hall fell silent. She was supposed to give a short speech, but as she looked at the crowd, she felt her chest tighten. For a moment, her voice would not come out. Panic rose inside her. She wanted to run, but she saw Keanu in the front row, his eyes calm, his presence grounding her. She took a breath. "I came here tonight," she began softly, thinking I had to hide my feelings behind a smile. But sometimes, the truth is stronger than the mask. Life has moments when even the strongest of us feel broken. But I have learned tonight that kindness can heal more than applause ever will. The hall grew quiet. People leaned closer. When someone sees you, truly sees you, without judgment, it can change everything. Tonight, I was reminded of that, and for that, I am grateful. Her voice trembled, but she continued, and with each word, she grew stronger. The crowd listened, not to a star reading lines, but to a human speaking truth. When she finished, there was no rush of loud cheers at first. There was silence. And then, slowly, the audience rose to their feet, clapping with respect. It was not for her fame, it was for her courage. Sandra's eyes filled with tears as she stepped down. She looked toward Keanu. He had not moved, but his soft smile told her everything she needed to hear. That he was proud of her, not as a co-star, not as a celebrity, but as a person who had dared to be real. But just as Sandra thought the night had given her all its surprises, something unexpected happened. A reporter backstage whispered a question that would change everything. "Is there something between you and Keanu?" Those words spread like fire. Suddenly, what had been a private moment of kindness began to turn into a story for the world, and neither of them knew how far it would go or how deeply it would test them both. The night ended, but the whispers did not. By the next morning, news outlets and magazines had already begun spinning stories. Headlines appeared everywhere, asking the same question. Is there something between Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock? Sandra woke up to her phone buzzing endlessly. Messages from friends, calls from her agent, emails from reporters. It was overwhelming. She sat on her bed, her hair messy, her heart racing. She had been through media storms before, but this one felt different. Because this time it was not just about her career. It was about a moment that had been real, personal, and deeply fragile. She sighed and thought, why can't they just let kindness be kindness? Meanwhile, Keanu also woke to a flood of attention. But unlike most people in Hollywood, he did not panic. He had faced loss, heartbreak, and noise from the world before. He knew how to stay calm in storms. He read the headlines, then put his phone down. He decided one thing. If Sandra was being hurt by this, he would stand by her again, no matter what it cost. Later that day, they met in a quiet cafe away from cameras. Sandra wore dark glasses, her face hidden, while Keanu walked in with his usual quiet steps. When he sat across from her, she looked up, her eyes full of worry. "This is getting out of hand," she whispered. "They're turning it into something it's not." Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady. "They can write what they want, but the truth is ours. No one can change what really happened." Sandra shook her head. "But it hurts. They don't see the pain I carry. They don't see what that moment meant to me. They just want a story." He watched her carefully. "Then let's not give them power. Let's focus on what matters, your healing, your strength. I didn't stand by you for the cameras. I did it because I care." Her eyes filled with tears again. She wanted to believe his words, but years of betrayal had made her cautious. She asked softly, "Why do you always show up for others even when it costs you?" Keanu gave a small smile. "Because I know how it feels when no one does." The words hit Sandra like a wave. She knew about Keanu's past, the tragedies he had faced, the loved ones he had lost, the silence he often carried with him. In that moment, she realized that his kindness came not from perfection, but from pain. He had turned his suffering into compassion. Before she could respond, the cafe door opened. A stranger walked in, phone in hand, snapping photos. The sound of the click froze them both. Sandra's heart sank. Within hours, those photos spread online. The whispers grew louder, and now the world was convinced something deeper was happening. As the storm grew, Sandra felt torn. Part of her wanted to hide, but another part of her wondered if this was fate's way of pushing her to face the truth. About herself, about her pain, and about the man who stood beside her with unshakable kindness. And what neither of them knew was that this storm was only the beginning. The days ahead would test not only their friendship, but also their resilience, their humility, and their ability to stay true to who they really were. The photos from the cafe spread faster than either of them could imagine. Headlines screamed about secret meetings, about romance, about a love story reborn. Television hosts debated their lives as if they owned them. Strangers on social media filled timelines with opinions, some kind, others cruel. For Sandra, it was suffocating. She had always been private about her heart, and now it felt like the world had torn open her silence. She sat in her home, curtains closed, phone turned off, trying to escape the noise. But no matter how hard she tried, the whispers echoed in her mind. Keanu, however, stayed calm. He did not chase the cameras, nor did he defend himself with loud words. Instead, he made one simple choice. He would reach out to Sandra again because he knew she needed him more than ever. He called her, and for a long moment, she did not answer. But then slowly she picked up. Her voice was tired, fragile. "I can't do this, Keanu. I feel like they're tearing me apart. They don't care about the truth. They only want their story." His reply was soft but firm. "Then let them write their story. We will live ours. You don't have to hide, Sandra." "Not from me." "Not from yourself." Her breath trembled. She wanted to believe, but fear still held her. And if they never stop? If they twist every word, every moment? Keanu paused, then said, "Then we give them something they can't twist. We show them respect, humility, and kindness. Not for them, but for ourselves. People forget rumors, but they remember truth when it is lived." Those words stayed in her heart. A few days later, both of them were invited to a charity event. Sandra hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to avoid more cameras, more questions. But when she remembered Keanu's words, she decided to go. The night of the event, she arrived in a simple dress, her smile cautious. Whispers filled the hall the moment she stepped in. But then she saw Keanu waiting at the entrance. He greeted her with the same calm presence he always carried, not caring about the flashes of cameras around them. He extended his hand. "Walk with me." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. Together they walked inside. The cameras exploded with light, but neither of them flinched. The event began, and soon the focus turned to the reason they were there, raising funds for children who had lost their families. Sandra listened as stories were shared. Stories of resilience, of young hearts carrying heavy pain, yet still finding hope. As she heard them, something inside her shifted. She realized that while the world was busy writing about her and Keanu, there were people facing storms much harder than gossip, and she knew she wanted to help. When it was her turn to speak on stage, she paused. Her voice shook at first, but she looked at Keanu in the crowd, and his steady gaze gave her courage. "I know what it feels like to carry pain," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I know what it means to hide behind a smile. But tonight, I see that even in darkness, kindness can light a way. And sometimes, it only takes one hand reaching out to remind us we are not alone." The hall grew silent again, just like that first night. Then applause filled the air, not for her fame, but for her honesty. As she stepped down, Keanu was there to meet her. He leaned close and whispered, "You did more than speak. You healed hearts tonight." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not only from pain, they were from hope. What she did not know was that the days ahead would test her in ways she never imagined. Because while kindness could heal, the world still had shadows waiting to challenge everything she was beginning to rebuild. The charity night ended with warmth and hope, but outside those walls the noise grew louder. Some praised Sandra for her honesty, others twisted her words into gossip. Tabloids filled pages with wild stories, and television shows debated her every move. Sandra tried to stay calm, but the pressure returned. She sat in her living room, scrolling through comments online. Some called her brave, others mocked her. She felt her chest tighten again. Why can't they just let me live as a person? Her phone buzzed, and it was Keanu. She answered with a tired voice. I feel like I'm drowning again, he replied gently. Then let me be the anchor. His calmness gave her a breath of air. He suggested they meet away from the city, somewhere quiet, where the noise could not follow. 2 days later, they drove out to the countryside. The air was fresh, the sky wide, and silence wrapped around them like a blanket. They walked along a small river, away from cameras, away from questions. Sandra stopped, looking at the water. Keanu, do you ever get tired of carrying other people's pain? You are always giving, always helping. Doesn't it break you? He paused, staring at the ripples in the river. It does. Sometimes I feel empty. Sometimes I go home and sit in silence, wondering if I've given too much. But then I remember what it feels like to be alone in pain. I promised myself long ago, if I could stop even one person from feeling that loneliness, I would try. Sandra's eyes filled again. That's why you came to me that night, isn't it? He nodded. Yes, because I saw myself in you. The way you smiled, but your eyes carried storms. I knew that feeling too well. Her heart ached. She realized that Keanu's kindness was not born from a perfect life, but from wounds he had turned into compassion. She felt both comforted and afraid, because if kindness came from pain, then he had suffered more than anyone should. As they continued walking, the sky darkened with clouds. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. Instead of running for cover, Keanu lifted his face to the sky, letting the rain wash over him. Sandra laughed through her tears, watching him. You're unbelievable, he smiled, rain dripping from his hair. Sometimes you just have to let life fall on you. You can't control the storm, but you can choose how to stand in it. They stood there together, rain pouring down, yet it felt like freedom. But while they found peace in that moment, the world was not ready to let them rest. As they returned to the city, a new headline exploded across every screen. Keanu and Sandra hide away together. What are they keeping secret? The storm had followed them, and this time it threatened to drag not just Sandra, but also Keanu into the fire. The headlines about their countryside escape spread like wildfire. What had been a private moment of healing was now being painted as a secret romance. Journalists followed them. Paparazzi hid in shadows, and strangers demanded answers. Sandra felt trapped again. Every time she opened her phone, her face stared back at her, surrounded by stories she never told. She whispered to herself, "They don't see me. They only see what they want." One evening, she sat in her kitchen, head resting in her hands. The pressure was too much. Then the doorbell rang. When she opened it, Keanu was there, holding 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might need this," he said softly. She managed a small smile. "You always show up." He placed the tea on the table and sat across from her. "I know this feels heavy, but storms pass. And even if they don't, we can walk through them together." His calm voice was steady, but Sandra noticed his tired eyes. "Keanu, this is hurting you too." "You don't deserve this," he shook his head. "Pain shared is lighter. If the world wants to talk, let them. I care more about you than about their noise." Those words broke her guard. She cried openly, her tears spilling over years of silence. Keanu did not try to stop her. He simply sat, letting her lean on his shoulder, offering nothing but presence. The next day, a charity foundation invited both of them to speak again, this time for children fighting illness. Sandra hesitated, afraid the media would twist it. But Keanu reminded her, this is not about them. It's about the kids, so they went. In the hospital, they met children whose bodies were weak, but whose spirits glowed. One boy, no older than 10, looked up at Sandra and said, "You smiled on TV when I was sad. You made me feel less alone." Those words shattered her heart in the best way. She knelt beside him, holding his hand. "Thank you. You just reminded me why I do what I do." Keanu watched silently, his eyes soft. He knew the world could write lies. But here in this hospital, truth lived in every small smile, every hand held, every tear of gratitude. After the visit, as they walked out together, Sandra turned to him. "This is what matters, isn't it? Not the headlines, not the whispers. Just this," he nodded. "Yes, kindness is the only story worth telling." For the first time in a long time, Sandra felt peace. But just as she began to breathe easier, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Are you two finally going to admit the truth?" The cameras clicked, the flashes blinded, and the questions rained down. Sandra froze. Her heart pounded. The moment she feared was here. The world demanded an answer, and she knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The flashes were blinding, the voices sharp. Reporters crowded around them, shouting questions. "Are you together? Is this love? What is the truth?" Sandra froze. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. For so long she had avoided these questions, afraid of the weight they carried. She wanted to run, to hide from the storm. But then Keanu stepped forward. His calm presence spread like light in the chaos. He lifted his hand, signaling silence. The crowd grew still, waiting for his words. His voice was steady. "The truth is simple. What you saw was kindness. What you saw was friendship. What you saw was one person standing beside another when they needed it most. And if that melts your heart, then let it, because the world needs more of that." His words were clear, free of fear, free of games. Sandra looked at him, her eyes wet with tears. In that moment, she realized that kindness was stronger than rumors, and humility louder than gossip. She stepped beside him and spoke softly but firmly. "Keanu is not my shield for the cameras. He is my friend, my brother in kindness, someone who stood by me when I was breaking. If the world wants to turn that into a headline, let them. But we know the truth." The silence that followed was deep. Even the reporters, known for chasing drama, felt the weight of honesty. Then, slowly, applause rose. Not staged, not forced, but genuine. In the days that followed, the noise of gossip began to fade. People remembered not the rumors, but the moment when two stars showed raw humanity. They remembered the hand on the arm, the whisper of comfort, the walk through storms, the laughter in the rain, the kindness shared in hospitals. Sandra found strength again. She no longer felt the need to hide her pain because she had turned it into purpose. She began speaking more openly about her struggles, reminding others that even behind the brightest smiles, there can be battles unseen. Keanu, as always, stayed humble. He never claimed credit, never chased attention. He simply continued living with quiet respect, giving kindness wherever it was needed, reminding people that true strength lies not in fame, but in compassion. Together, they became a symbol, not of gossip, but of resilience, humility, and hope. Their story was no longer about romance or rumors. It was about two human beings who chose to stand in kindness when the world demanded spectacle. And in the hearts of millions who watched, one truth remained clear. Kindness has the power to heal, to inspire, and to melt every heart it touches.